What's up guys, Magic Official here, and today I'm doing a video for you guys about the worst and the greatest console video games ever made. This is not going to include PC. PC is going to be a separate video. But this is the greatest 5 and the worst 5 video games ever made for consoles based on different categories. I split this into 5 categories. The categories are RPG, side-scrolling adventure games, 3D adventure games, first-person shooters, and then the last category is the overall greatest video game and worst video game of all time. And notice, if I put a game as the greatest or the worst, then even if they fit under the other categories, I'm not going to include them in those other categories. Say it's the best game ever made, a 3D adventure game, that's a category. That wouldn't be fair, it would win. So if it's considered by me the greatest video game ever made, I'm not going to put it into any of the other categories. Same goes for the worst. So just keep that in mind. If you hear a game somewhere in there that you think, hey, that's not the best of this genre, maybe that's because it's the best game ever made in my opinion. You'll have to wait and see. This is not about current gen consoles either. It does include games from current gen consoles, like it takes into account the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Wii, but it also takes into account Atari 2600, it takes into account the Nintendo 64, Super NES, Genesis. It's over all consoles that ever came out, whether it's the Magnavox Odyssey or the PlayStation 3. All consoles ever. Top 5 best and worst games in each category. So let's start with the first category, which is RPG. This is, I feel like I'm treading on sacred ground because everybody knows how many RPGs there are. Well, you can't really know how many there are because there's so many, and there's so many incredible ones, so many great ones, so many bad ones, that it's kind of feel like I'm treading on sacred ground by choosing one out of all of them. But I'll start with the worst first. The worst RPG ever is Beyond the Beyond for the PlayStation 1. It's developed by Camelot, and it's the first RPG to ever reach the PlayStation 1. But it had a horrible story, the visuals were absolutely muddy, the controls were unresponsive, and there were just a lot of problems with this game. Camelot really screwed up. Camelot makes some really great games, but this game was just a foul ball. It's complete garbage. Just avoid this game. Now the greatest, this one I'm really probably going to get fired for because of how many great RPGs there are. It was hard to come to a choice. There's Final Fantasy series. There's all kinds of other games. But the best one ever made is Chrono Trigger for the Super NES. Now, some people may bash me for this, but those who have played Chrono Trigger understand why I'm saying this. It's developed by Square Enix, and unlike most RPGs, combat occurs in the same setting as the general navigation if you're going overhead. The random fights that come out of nowhere, you don't go into another screen, they just still happen overhead. And this game includes time travel. It takes place in a world similar to Earth with time zones that are reminiscent to like prehistoric ages with dinosaurs, the Middle Ages with knights, and even a post-apocalyptic future. It has a great engaging story and gameplay that will leave you hooked on it for a long time, so that's why I picked Chrono Trigger for the Super NES as greatest RPG ever made. Alright, now on to the next category. It's side-scrolling adventure game. This also has a lot of great ones, a lot of really bad ones out of the ballpark. So let's start with the worst, and the worst is Back to the Future Parts 2 and 3 for the NES. They both came bundled in one cartridge. Now, developer LJN takes a big budget, amazing classical movie and releases a game that sports the same name and is absolutely confusing with all the item collecting, time periods, unscrambling words, etc., and a scenery that in no way, shape, or form is reminiscent of the movie. Not only that, but the controls are really buggy and messed up, and the visuals are absolutely garbage. This is not one of the games that you want to immerse yourself in because you won't be able to. When it comes to movie adaptations, this is one of the worst you can get. It's not the worst movie game ever, but it is one of the worst movie games ever, in my opinion. Worst side-scrolling adventure game ever made. And the best. This one I might get flamed for too, but I'm coming out and saying it. Super Mario Bros. 3 for the NES. It's also included in Super Mario All-Stars with redefined graphics for the SNES and the Wii. It's also on Game Boy Advance in Super Mario Advance 4, and it's available on the Wii Virtual Console. This game is developed by Nintendo and it needs no explanation. Most consider it to be the best Mario game in the series. And even though my personal favorite side-scrolling Mario game is Super Mario World, I have to give credit where it's due. The game did everything right. It can be easy, yet challenging. It can be fun, yet frustrating. It's great for all ages, whether you're a casual gamer, you're a novice gamer, or you're a hardcore gamer. This game will suck you in and leave you entertained. The worlds are colorful and amazing, and they immerse you, and you just want to complete all the levels and reach the final boss, defeat him. I'm not going to give spoilers, or at least not try to give spoilers for any of the games in case you haven't played it. If you haven't played Super Mario Bros. 3, what's wrong with you? Go play it right now. So, best side-scrolling adventure game of all time, Super Mario Bros. 3 for SNES. Next category is also kind of a hard one to choose from, but then again, all the categories are really hard to rule out one for each, best and worst. Next is 3D adventure game. There's so many great 3D adventure games, so many crap ones, but here we go. The worst is Superman for the Nintendo 64. This is developed by Titus Software, and it's based on a great, critically acclaimed animated series of Superman, but it had very confusing objectives, very short time limits. It was horribly glitched, poor controls, and terrible muddy visuals, and extremely repetitive. You are going to get a really severe headache just from level 1 of this game. I love Superman. He's my favorite superhero of all the superheroes, but this game is complete crap. Stay away. Right now, the best 3D adventure game. There's a lot of great ones. There's Mario Galaxy. Most of them are from Nintendo, and this just happens to be a Nintendo one. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess for the GameCube, and also released on the Wii, and developed by Nintendo. This is the 13th installment in the Zelda series, and it was one of the Wii's launch titles. It went out for pre-order 2 years before releasing, and it still got sold like crazy. I mean, that's how you know your game is good, when it goes out on pre-order 2 years before it even gets released. And I mean, it is beautiful, absolutely beautiful game. One of the best graphics on the Wii. The only games that I think topple this in terms of graphics are probably the Mario Galaxy series, and the whole game feels epic. You feel a real sense of scale with this game. Everything feels huge, and you feel like you're a great warrior on an epic quest. And the music is incredible, and I can just keep going on and on. This game kicks ass. Play it. Best 3D adventure game ever, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Now, first-person shooters. Best and the worst. The worst, there are a few that some people consider the worst. Haze, Mag. Me, I'm going way back on this one, and I'm saying the worst is Noah's Ark 3D for the SNES. It's basically Wolfenstein at 3D with redone graphics, and instead of being a guy with a gun, you're Noah and you're using a slingshot and shooting sheep and goats. Sounds badass, but it's executed poorly, and happens to be the only game ever released for the SNES that was not licensed officially by Nintendo. How this happened, I'm not going to explain it. That would go on for too long. If you want, you can see a better in-depth review of somebody who's a lot better of a game reviewer than me, James Nintendo Nerd, the AVGN Angry Video Game Nerd. Can click a link down below where he talks about Noah's Ark 3D and how it came to exist without being licensed by Nintendo. But yeah, this is the worst first-person shooter game ever made. And now the best. I can tell I'm going to get a lot of flame for this one, because everybody's going to say, why didn't you pick Battlefield? Why didn't you pick Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 or something? I guess I kind of already spoiled it, saying that I didn't pick any of the Call of Duties or any of the Battlefields, or even any of the Halos. Sorry, I know I'm going to get flame for this, but this is definitely the best first-person shooter game ever made. Black for the PlayStation 2 and for the Xbox. This is by Criterion Games and EA. This game was insanely fun, absolutely beautiful, and pushed the graphics of these consoles to their limits, with visuals that rival even current PS3 and Xbox 360 games. And it had some of the best weapon effects ever seen in a first-person shooter, and you can destroy anything. This has beast destructible environments. You can destroy everything except for water. It does have a short story and no multiplayer, which is sad, but it's so much fun that you'll want to play it over and over again, and that makes up for the lack of multiplayer and lack of a longer campaign because of the replayability factor. So, best first-person shooter goes to Black, PS2 and Xbox. Now, final category, best video games and worst video game of all time ever for a console. Now let's start with the worst again. This one, I know this one I'm not gonna get flame for because it's pretty much a universal consensus. This is the worst video game ever made. E.T. for the Atari 2600. It was released in 1982 and developed by Atari, and it was developed in only 5 weeks. They wanted to get it out in time for the holiday season, so they hurried up and released it. Worst mistake ever. It is the game that caused the video game industry to crash in 1983 and almost made video games non-existent. I know you people today, you love your PS3s, your 360s, your Wiis, or whatever you have. Well, this game almost caused your PS3 and 360 to never exist. The thing that ended up saving video games was Nintendo with Super Mario Bros. On the NES, and that brought video games back. That saved them. So, you may hate on Nintendo all you want and say it's nothing but a kid's system with inferior graphics. Compare that to Modern Warfare. We're badass compared to you Nintendo people. Just remember that if it wasn't for the red and blue plumber, you wouldn't have your COD. It would have all been thanks to this game, E.T., that you would not be playing games right now. I'm not going to say anything about the game itself because of how bad it is. I'm just going to leave that untouched, and I'm not even going to show video game clips. I'm just here talking about it. I might show you the cover art somewhere along here, but I'm not even going to talk about the game itself. It's that bad. Never play this game. And now, the best video game of all time. This one I might get some flame for also, but I don't think I will get that much because this, just like how E.T. is a universal consensus of being the worst game of all time, this is generally by almost all, not just me, but critics, by anybody who's played this game, it's a universal consensus that this is the greatest game ever made. The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64. It was also re-released on the GameCube with the Master Quest as a freebie for those who pre-ordered The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. It's also on Wii Virtual Console, and it's remade in 3D with new graphics for the 3DS. This was developed by Nintendo, and it is an absolutely perfect game. Like I said before, universal consensus. The music is the best you will ever hear in a video game. The fact that you play the music and the game revolves around music so much, it's just so immersive, and it makes you feel like you're actually a part of the game and you're actually changing things and doing stuff that's important. All the magic powers you get, the items, the worlds are beautiful. I mean, sure, the graphics have shown their age, but this was so visually appealing back in the day. And no, I'm not saying this is the best game ever just because of the nostalgia factor, though nostalgia does play a big part in this. I remember the greatest moment of your childhood, of almost anybody who's played this game, is hearing the music of the Temple of Time as the door opened. That was just the most epic feeling ever. And I mean, but besides the nostalgia factor, the game is still an incredible game today. Sure, like I said before, the graphics have shown their age. It doesn't look nearly as visually appealing as it does now, but after 5 minutes into the game, you forget that and it becomes beautiful again, and you remember why you fell in love with this game in the first place. There have been better games released since then with better controls, with longer stories, bigger games, like one I included earlier, The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, that overall is a better game than Ocarina of Time, but it's not a greater game. No game has ever felt as epic as this game has, and never made you feel as immersed as Ocarina of Time has. Skyward Sword, Galaxy, nothing comes, everything just pale in comparison to this game. Ocarina of Time. I don't even know what I can say to do this game justice. You just need to play through the whole game. You will get hooked. Anyways, that's all. So now, I'll leave you guys. Comment down below your list of 5 best and worst console games of all time. I'm curious to know. And this is Magic Official, and I am out. Thank you for listening. Peace.